For 2,000 years, the Christian church has proclaimed that at the end of his life, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified on a cross, honorably buried, and then on the third day rose from the dead.
The evidence is there, the sources are there, the picture is clear and coherent, and in my academic opinion, the picture is quite compelling.
But others claim Jesus didn't die on the cross. He simply passed out and revived in the tomb. Some modern scholars claim Jesus' body was taken off the cross, thrown on a garbage heap, and devoured by wild dogs. The so-called resurrection appearances of Jesus were nothing more than hallucinations or grief visions, not literal physical appearances of Jesus himself.
Now, if the resurrection had not happened, then we wouldn't be here speaking. There would have been no Christian movement.
I spent 10 years as a skeptic. For me, I wondered if there was any meaning in life. I wondered if when I'm buried, the leaves blow over my grave and that's it, or is there meaning? And for me, I specialized in the research on the resurrection. And you know what? There were times when I wondered what was going to happen with this research, but the conclusion was it led me out of the woods, out of the despair. And for me, the resurrection is what really says life has meaning. There's an eternity, all because Jesus Christ was raised from the dead.
What does an examination of the historical evidence from both secular and Christian sources reveal?
You've got to let Jesus be Jesus. You've got to let him speak for himself and be who he was. Otherwise, you are simply imposing your ideology, your politically correct Jesus, on the Jesus of history, and you will be apt to come up with a Jesus who looks just like you.
What difference does it make in your life if the evidence does lead to the conclusion that Jesus actually rose from the dead?
If Jesus is who he claims to be, then there is an accountability that we all have to Jesus. And that's uncomfortable to confront.
We invite you to join us for this special edition of the John Ankerberg Show and hear world-class historians, theologians, and archaeologists address these issues.
Welcome. I'd like to begin our program today by asking you a question. Is there compelling historical evidence to demonstrate that after Jesus was honorably buried, he arose from the dead? Well, in order to answer this important question, I believe we need to examine 12 historical facts about Jesus' life that are accepted by almost all critical scholars in the world today, non-Christian and Christian alike. We want to present the evidence for each of these facts from both secular sources and early Christian sources. And after we do, I think you'll understand why these facts are accepted by the majority of critical scholars today. Finally, after establishing the evidence for each of these facts of history, we want to see if they lead to a conclusion about whether or not Jesus rose from the dead. Well, to begin today, I want you to listen to Dr. Gary Habermas, who is known and respected as one of the premier scholars in the world on historical research surrounding Jesus' resurrection. Listen. You've written a book entitled The Historical Jesus, and you have outlined a very unique approach where you have picked 12 historical facts that are agreed to by virtually all critical scholars. Tell us how you picked out these facts.
Well, first, my purpose in doing this was to have common ground that critics and believers can share together and say, now, what do we do with this common body of facts? The 12 begin at Jesus' death by crucifixion. I think there are many others throughout his life, but I start with that and go through till the end. And my point is to pick facts with virtually no exceptions, which will fit two criteria. Criteria number one, the vast majority of critical scholars will admit this fact, and I mean 90 percentile, all right? And secondly, I will not use a fact that is not multiply attested at several levels by several sources and will give us looks at this from different perspectives. And I think that's a good 1-2 punch for this.
Now next, we're going to examine 5 of these facts. First, Jesus died by crucifixion. Second, he was buried. Third, his death caused his disciples to despair and lose hope. Fourth, the tomb in which Jesus was buried was discovered to be empty just a few days later. And fifth, the disciples had experiences which they believed were literal appearances of the risen Jesus. Is there historical evidence that establishes these facts? Listen. All right, let's take fact number 1. Jesus died by crucifixion. You not only cite that this came from Scripture, You say it's attested to by over 17 non-Christian secular sources.
Well, yes, you have scripture with Paul, with 4 Gospels, with Acts, etc. There are about 17 secular sources for Jesus. 12 of them cite his death with all sorts of details. So 12 out of 17 tell us that he died with this or that.
Name a few.
Well, okay, you've got Tacitus, who gives us some information and mentions Pilate and Tiberius Caesar. You've got the Talmud with a reference to Jesus being hanged on Passover Eve after they were going to stone him. You've got another Jewish source, Josephus, who says he was crucified during under the leadership of Pontius Pilate. You've got 2 sources, 2 very much ignored sources, Thallus, a Greek historian writing about 52 AD, and Phlegon, a freedman from Emperor Hadrian, writing about 120, about the time of Tacitus and Suetonius. Both of them record the darkness that surrounds the earth during the crucifixion. You have Marabar Serapion, a Syrian writer, who talks to his son and says Jesus was a man who died for his teachings. And you have the satirist and historian Lucian, who, by the way, wrote just about our only ancient account of historiography, how to do history, these tools and rules that we use. And Lucian says, teasingly about Jesus, he's a crucified sophist, and he taught his followers to be brothers and not to fear death. But he died for these things. Now, those are a few of the sources we have from secular history. Now, on top of those, we have some unique medical information about death by crucifixion, so much so that 15 years ago, the Journal of the American Medical Association could have an article by a team, 1 pastor, 2 medical personnel, who write about death by crucifixion, and these men write a death certificate for Jesus. So you have medicine coming in with a dozen secular sources, with the New Testament, of which Paul is a leader here. Everybody admits he's really an eyewitness. This is why John Dominic Crossan and Marcus Borg do not hesitate to say that the cross has to be undoubted in the life of Christ, and it's by far the best attested event.
Now, you probably know that one of the leaders of the Jesus Seminar, John Dominic Crossan, claimed on the ABC special with Peter Jennings that Jesus' body was taken down off the cross, thrown onto a garbage heap, and he was eaten by wild dogs. I asked Dr. Habermas to comment on whether or not there is any historical evidence for this amazing statement.
I could say for the moment that it's interesting that virtually none of his friends have followed him. This doesn't prove anything here or there, but maybe it's a hint that the data are not in his favor. And one thing I would say to